Thank you for joining me on another episode of She Leads Now podcast, where we help career and entrepreneurial women gain the tools to develop a success mindset, create winning strategies, build collaborative relationships, and take bold action towards creating impact and fulfillment in their lives and careers. I'm your host, Sabine Gideon, and I'm on a mission to awaken and activate women and emerging leaders so they can tap into their innate leadership ability, elevate their influence, and create the impact they were destined to make. If you're ready to uplevel your confidence, courage, and influence, you've come to the right place. Join me weekly for insights, strategies, and resources to help you grow, develop, and embody the leader you are meant to be, so that you can make the impact you know you are called to make and establish the legacy you've always dreamed. The world eagerly awaits the emergence of your brilliance, impact, and influence. So with that, let's dive into this week's episode. Hello and welcome to another episode of She Leads Now. I'm your host, Sabine Gideon, and I am excited to bring you another installment of the LeadHership Reloaded series, reimagining, redefining, and rehumanizing leadership. And so today I have with me someone who I've been admiring from afar, Nicole Jansen. And so Nicole is a strategic advisor and leadership coach. She has been empowering women in leadership for over 30 years. Her vast experience in business, leadership, and human behavior has uniquely equipped her to bring out the best in others. She is the founder and host of Leaders of Transformation podcast, which is in the top 1.5% of all podcasts globally, reaching listeners in over 140 countries. Welcome to the show, Nicole.
Thank you for having me here, Sabine. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited. I love your energy and what you're all about. And I'm excited to have a great conversation here today.
The excitement goes both ways. And so before we get into what you do today, if you would just briefly walk us through your career journey.
Well, it's kind of crazy, huh? I mean, I listened to you read the bio and I'm thinking, man, like how far we've come. It's all by God's grace. Let me tell you, it is all by God's grace. So I started out in an entrepreneurial household. My parents were entrepreneurs and my dad owned franchises in the automotive industry and my mom worked for him. And then they got involved in direct sales and network marketing back when I was 7, which was 43 years ago. And it was just a unique experience to watch the journey of them building a business from home and even helping them out with that, because I was like, what can I do to help? And to see the difference in that business versus the other businesses that my dad had and how they approached business. And so I started my own business when I was 16 years old. I knew I wanted to be in business for myself and the freedom, being my own boss, all that. I had no idea what I was going to do. I just knew that that's what I wanted to do. I just didn't want to have a job. And so I went down, I'm originally from Toronto, so I went down and registered my company with the Ministry of Commercial and Consumer Relations. And they said, well, what kind of business is it going to be? Because back then you had to do it in person and in paper. And I said, oh, geez, I didn't really think that they were going to ask me that question. So I just wrote down sales and marketing. And I thought that was broad enough to cover whatever the heck I figured out how to do. So that's really where it started. And I started just with big goals and vision for what I wanted to create. And then my parents, with their business, specifically the direct sales business, I was helping them in that, and then gradually ended up partnering with them. So alongside my own business, I also helped them in their business and spent more and more time there because it was growing so fast. And so we built a very successful business. By the time I was in my mid-20s, I thought that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. Apparently, God had different plans because that business ended up falling apart. And I learned a lot as we were building that business. We had business in something 10, 11 countries, 12 countries, something like that. And it was awesome. It was a great learning experience. But I actually learned more on the way down about leadership, about ethics, about the mission, because it really, when things started to fall apart, that's where it fell apart at the seams. And so I took that experience and the experience of even during that time, helping with other businesses, people would say, hey, can you come in and help us restructure? And I just took all of that knowledge and said, God, okay, well, what am I going to do with this? And that's where out of that was birthed Discover the Edge. And that was in 2005. And it was to help people to understand and discover and play to their strengths, which in business, because I kind of looked at the common denominator, which is every business is a people business. Leadership is about people. Having a mission and fulfilling a mission and vision in life is about people and its relationships. And I thought that was the most important skill to teach and to encourage. And then through that, people were getting to know themselves and others better and all of that. And so it just gradually developed and expanded into more, where I realized it wasn't just personality dynamics. It was this, it was that, a lot of different tools that I added to the table, and that was able to even extract from my own past experience to where I am today, where I started the podcast in 2015. And I've been coaching, like you said, I've been coaching people from all walks of life, different industries, and really helping them to understand who they are, understand their identity, and operate from that identity and from integrity, from a place of integrity. Because I believe leadership is really about integrity, and it's about knowing who you are and bringing the best out, and then also creating an environment for other people to thrive, right? So that's a little bit of the backstory to how I got here. But as I said, all God's grace.
Awesome. I love it. And I think I saw on your podcast, you're like 400 something, like 430 episodes in. And when I saw that, I was wondering like, dang, when did she start this?
Yes, that was a divine download. So it was during a season in my life which I just kind of skimmed over, kind of saying this is where I got to, but there was a lot of bumps in the road, and not just with the business, but also health-wise, financially, relationally. I had gotten married and things were not going well and all this stuff. And so in that season of my life, I was like, God, what do I do? I just don't feel the energy to put the content out there, produce content. I was initially ahead of the game in terms of like leading the industry, and then just distracted, focusing on my marriage, focusing on all the other things going on, and kind of fallen behind in course development and all this kind of stuff. And so, but I was like, God, I'm just like emotionally drained. I don't think I have the energy to do that right now. What can I do? What can I do? And so one morning, it was like an early Saturday morning, 4:30 in the morning. And I literally, I woke up and I heard God say, and it's not like an audible voice, but it was an inner voice knowing. And it was just so clear. It said, you're going to do a podcast. It's going to be called The Leaders of Transformation. You're going to interview difference makers and world changers. Go. And I was like, a podcast? I don't even know exactly what that is. And I had Leaders of Transformation, the name. I was going to use it for something else, a mastermind. And I was like, well, when am I going to do this? And it was like, now. And so then, of course, I'm qualified. I'm like now. I'm the business strategist, because it had kind of evolved into business coaching and strategy. I'm like, so how am I doing? He said, now. And so I took him literally, okay. So I got up out of bed and I said, who do I know that knows this podcasting thing? And I had been on a podcast with somebody else. And so I reached out to him and said, hey, what do I need to know about this thing? We talked for about 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes. And it was Saturday morning. I hadn't had a whole big schedule or plan that day, serendipitously. So I literally started that day and was like, okay, what does this look like? And I was live 3 weeks later. And like I say, God's grace, because I literally was like, well, this is your idea. So I'm just putting it out there. And then if you want this to go somewhere, then you're going to need to do that part. And he has. And so it's just been an amazing journey.
Yes. I mean, kudos to you. I just celebrated at the time of this recording 50 a couple weeks ago. And
Congratulations.
Thank you. I feel like I was climbing a mountain to get to 50. So I could only imagine in terms of the diligence and the consistency and the labor that goes into getting to that space of 435. So kudos to you on that. So my question to you is, as we were talking, as someone who understands and knows the power of being grounded in your identity in order to be effective as a leader or even just a human being, a day-to-day human being. One, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing with clients, right? Getting to that place of getting clarity on their identity so that they can move forward in purpose. And then what are some of the opportunities that exist now that we're supposedly in this post-pandemic era?
So challenges, first of all, I think one of them is fear. Yes, I do have it on my LinkedIn that God is first. And it wasn't always that way. I mean, there was a time where I was quietly a believer. I didn't put it out there in the same way that I do now. And the reason why is because I felt like I wouldn't be accepted, that people wouldn't get it. And quite frankly, I didn't fully get it at that time either. And so as I have grown in my faith and realized how important it is and how integral it is to who I am, then I was like, I need to put this forward. And people need to know this, because we can talk about leadership, we can talk about strategy, we can talk about mindset and the beliefs and all these things. But at the core of it, it's understanding who we are and who God's created us to be. I say, if you want to know the purpose of a thing, you got to ask the one who created the thing. So in this case, God created us. And so we need to ask him and say, what did you create me for? And I think there's a real challenge right now because we have media that tells us who we're supposed to be. We see these images and, oh, I want to be like that person or that person. And there's a lot of, even in the soul searching, the self-awareness seeking industry, the personal development industry, there's a lot of self focus and not necessarily God focus. So here I am, based on my experience, based on my environment, I'm going to figure out who I am and what I'm made for. And we're missing a really important piece, right? And so that's why if I know who God is and I know who God created me to be and the nature of God, and I'm made in his image, it will change. It's not based on what I think I'm created for. It's what I understand that he is created for, whether I like it or not, which I like it, so it's good, right? So, there's that disconnect. There's a lot of external validations that I assign our identity to, whether it's the accolades, the recognition, how many followers we have, the title that we have. A lot of people in leadership, they say, I'm a leader because I have a title. Well, that's not leadership, right? You and I both know there's a lot of people that are leaders that don't have the title, right? But they lead by example, and people follow them because of who they are and what they're demonstrating, versus somebody who says, follow me, I'm your leader. And so it's kind of like the old joke, right? I think it was Margaret Thatcher who said, if you have to say you're a lady, you're not. And I would say that applies to leadership as well. If you have to say you're a leader, you might want to consider, you may not be, right? Because you'll know that by the result.
Right.
And so that's part of the challenge, is we don't know our identity. Our identities are wrapped up in other things. Like I said, whether it's the recognition, whether it's the accolades, whether it's even, in some cases, it's even our adversity. How many times have I've heard people say, well, you don't understand my situation. You don't understand what I went through. And so, and I've done that too, where it's like our adversity actually defines us. And so how can I be a great leader? How can I help other people be the very best that they can be, bring out that best in the workplace or whichever area of life, if I don't even know who I am? And there was a gentleman who I had on my show, I forget who it was right now. I think it was Larry Robertson. But anyway, he had a book, and he said in his book, he had quoted this statistic that of the C-suite leaders, and for those people, C-suite, so we're talking the CEOs, CFOs, CMOs, all that, the C-suite, those executive leaders, 70% of them did not know their purpose or their identity. They don't even know who they are. So there's a big challenge there. Now, in terms of recommendation, what I would say is the first and foremost thing you need to do is you need to understand who you are. But in order to understand who you are, you need to go to the source. you need to check in, whatever your faith is and whatever your relationship is with God, is to really say, okay, God, who did you create me to be? And then there are some great tools, like there's Strengths Finder, and we have the Enneagram, and all of these different tools that help us to understand a little bit better. DISC is a tool that I use. Colby, there's lots of great tools out there. But to study that and saying, okay, so you do these assessments and they say, this is who I am, or SDI is another one. And I filter everything through the word of God, and I filter everything through who God is saying that I am. It's a confirmation for me, right? And I don't get my identity because somebody else is telling me that that's who I am, but I'm checking it. Does this make sense? Do I have evidence of that? Right? Maybe even having a friend. I was just talking to somebody yesterday about this and said he wants to understand and leverage his strengths more and show his value in the workplace more at where he works. And I said, he doesn't actually even realize, because it's unconscious to him, his strengths, his unique genius. So I said, has a really good friend who was saying, oh my gosh, yes, you totally have that. I said, great, go back to that person and walk through a few of these other strengths and say, where do you see evidence in my life? Because you know me well, of where I apply these. So we get a perspective on it, but it's a confirmation of it, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So know who you are, know whose you are. And then from that place, you can understand what your purpose is and your assignment, right? Or your leadership role.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for breaking that down. A couple things that you said that I wanted to comment on. The leadership operating system model that he gave me basically starts with you, the organization, and the team. And a lot of work, I do a lot of my work with my clients on the you part. When I've asked the question of who are you, right? I always get the roles, the titles, and all these other things. And it becomes very uncomfortable for people to sit with that question. Who am I? And we can look around, and these are people who are in leadership role. These are people who are impacting society at different levels. And foundationally, that's not something in school, right? We weren't taught like to take time to figure out who you are. We aren't taught when we get into the workforce, like you're going to be great at whatever you do if you have this foundation of who you are. It's more of whatever these outward things are. And so I'm with you that should be foundational for anyone to step into a leadership role. Now, you don't need to be in a leadership role, right, to be able to do this work. But if you're going to be a leader, at the end of the day, if you don't know who you are, if you don't know what you value, if you don't know your beliefs, if you don't know what those things are, or even what you're driving towards, your purpose or your vision, who are you leading? And what are you leading them to? Right? Like, where are we going? Where are we going? Because the person who is quote unquote leading, they have a lot of blind spots, right, to their own selves.
Yeah. It reminds me of one of my mentors is Dr. Robert Rome, who founded Personality Insights. And he talks about the one particular personality type who likes to lead and be in charge and all of that, the D personality, that dominant driver, doer, decisive personality. And he said, the challenge with them is sometimes they're lost, but making good time. And I think that really depicts a lot of leaders out there. They're lost. They don't know they're lost. They're just busy about making good time. So they got the pedal to the metal and they're like, this is where we're going. Okay, well, when we get there, what's the result? And do we want to be there? Is that even necessary? What are we prioritizing? And so it's repositioning a lot of the work that sounds like you do with clients and that I do. It's like repositioning them so that when they see and they're moving forward, they're actually making headway. They're creating a legacy. They're creating impact in a way that actually works, that actually makes the impact in an even greater way. Because when you have God's grace on it, it just multiplies it. Like me going and doing a podcast on my own, big difference. People say, like, why has it been so successful? And man, it's God's grace, because yes, I did the work. Yes. Yet at the same time, he went far beyond even the work that I did, because I haven't done big marketing campaigns and put thousands of dollars into a marketing budget, or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars into a marketing budget to promote this. I think that we also spend a lot of time, and leaders get tired and busy, and their people get tired and busy because we do a lot of busy work. It's even like a badge of honor to be busy, busy, busy. It's, well, what are you busy about? Right? Busy and productive are two different things.
Right.
And hey, I'm a hard worker. My top strengths finder is achiever. I like to go, I like to make things happen. Yet at the same time, what I've learned through trial and error is I've learned that I only need to do the things that God is calling me to, no more, no less. There's a lady that I had on my show, another lady that in another book that I'll mention is The Path to Wealth, Mae McCarthy. She built $100 million company in software and so forth. I think multiple companies, but not one in particular, 100 million. And she talks about a process starting off the day, meeting with her CSO, her chief spiritual officer, right? The Holy Spirit, the God, and saying, okay, what are we doing today? And from that place, it's like her board meeting every day for 30 minutes. And from that place, then she builds her day. And she only does, she follows those promptings. And I've learned to do that, where it's like you follow those promptings, and you actually get what I heard somebody describe as a restful increase. There's a grace to it. There's an ease to it, right? And so it kind of goes away from, you talk about redefining leadership, goes away from this grinding it out, burning people out. We've got to do more because more means we get better results. Not necessarily. You may get a result and find out that you're barking up the wrong tree, and you're just like, well, what were you doing that for? There was no need. If you just did this over here, you would have had a whole lot more impact.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the notion of considering it a board meeting, because it's part of my morning routine, right? To spend time in prayer and worship. But there are days where either I don't wake up on time, or there's meetings like first thing in the morning, and there's a drastic difference between those days that you get that peace and that comfort and that knowing, and even just wisdom of what to do and what to focus on, versus those days when you're go and just trying to grind it out. So now I'm going to recondition my mind of, okay, I have a board meeting first thing in the morning that I need to be at. And of course, we know if it's a board meeting, right, we're showing up a lot different than we would if it's just something that we think is casual. One of the things that you were saying about the going back to the source. So Miles Monroe, or Dr. Miles Monroe, who has since passed, is today one of my mentors, right? Even though he's no longer in the living, and he talks about how, when something is broken, right, we go to whatever the pamphlet is, we go back to the manufacturer and go back to the source. And it was through his teachings that I started to really understand the importance of identity, right? I think for a very long time, I felt like I knew, not that I knew what my purpose was, but I knew that I was like driving towards my purpose, because I had a rock bottom experience in my 20s that led me to that pathway. But I didn't realize how critical or key the identity component of purpose and your assignment and being able to make an impact and all of these things. And so as I've been on this journey, because I do think it's a journey, right? As much as we're talking about people don't know themselves and they need to get to their place of identity, if it's been 30, 40, however many years, and you've been operating or taking on these different identities or being the chameleon for all these things and all these people, it's going to take some time for you to shed some of that, right? To get to the core of who you are. So we're definitely not making light that you can just wake up the next day and be like, I know who I am, and I know I have this confidence and whatnot. So it's been a journey to understand who I am in truth, based on his truth of who he created me to be. But one of the key pieces that I've learned through this process when it comes to identity, that within us, and I don't know if you've experienced this as you've gone through this process, there is a part of us that is almost afraid of who we really are. There is a part of us that shies away from the truth. And I think of Miriam Williamson and her quote or her poem, Our Deepest Fear, right? And it's not that we're small, it's that we're much more greater than we believe ourselves to be, or our environments reflect back to us. And so I'm curious on your journey to identity and your journey and even supporting your clients through that. Like, how do you get past that moment where you like, that's me, that's what I'm capable of, and not shy away from it, but lean into it? Because I think that that's where people stop, and that's where people get caught up, and then that's where people can go back into that status quo, normal, safety, whatever it is that they've perceived as familiarity and comfort.
Well, the funny thing is that we hear a lot about influencers and wanting to be an influencer, wanting to have more followers and all of this. And it's kind of this perception of, and I believe it's true, we do want to all be seen, known, and heard. Yet at the same time, it's kind of ironic because we actually also shy away from it. And so it's kind of like speaking on stage. If you want to be effective when you're speaking on stage and truly impactful to the audience, you've got to forget about yourself. So sometimes we're so concerned about ourselves that and how we're perceived that we actually play smaller than we're capable of. So speaking of public speaking, I remember being in a training for presentation training and so forth, and one of my mentors said, "You're still making it about you." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" But what he saw, and I think a lot of us do that, is that we are subconscious. We are so familiar in the way that we operate that we don't even realize that we operate from a place of how do I look? How do I sound? Versus being in service of others and literally forgetting yourself. And why I say that is because if sometimes, those moments when you're just in it, like you're serving, you're with somebody, you're like in the zone, and you forget about yourself. You forget about your inhibitions. Where do inhibitions come from? Based on self-assessments, right? We forget all of that and we're just in it. And sometimes it's like you look back and you go, whoa, how did I do that? Because we were getting outside ourselves and just being. And so, yes, I've had those moments. And then there's times where you're like, oh, and then you feel like you just want to run back and hide. You're like, I'm seen. Oh no. So the more you do anything, the more comfortable you get with it. It's a habit. It's a practice. So getting out there, challenging yourself. Like on my whiteboard, I have different things that's so I can see that all the time, is that boldness, right? Bold faith, being bold, taking small steps. And depending on where somebody's at, they may be really small steps compared to somebody else, but it doesn't matter. It's a small step of stretching outside, taking that tippy toe and going, I'm going to step outside that comfort zone. I'm going to put myself out there. Or better yet, you know what? I'm just going to forget myself today. I'm just going to show up and I'm going to serve people like I've never served them before. I'm going to encourage people like I've never encouraged them before. I'm just going to forget about me. This isn't about me. I'm going to put my hair together. I'm going to put my clothes and all that stuff, and it's done. And I'm going to forget about that. And I'm going to focus on the other person. And when you do that, that's where you connect more powerfully to them. You have more fun. They have more fun. It's greater productivity if you're in the workplace, working on things together, just forgetting about yourself. Setting that up front in the morning routine. Part of the morning routine is I'm setting myself up. I got my armor on. And I don't mean armor as in hiding armor. I'm talking about armor of faith. Spending a few minutes in the morning to set that up and then focus on the other people. Does that answer your question?
Oh, it absolutely does. So for those who are listening and they're thinking to themselves like, okay, how do I shut down that voice in my head, that negative voice? And I think Dr. Shiraz the gentleman from Positive Intelligence that wrote that book, he calls it The Judge. How do I stop that? How do I move forward? Because to your point, we all want to make an impact. Yeah. So what advice do you give to your clients when you see them at that place where they're getting in their own way because they're stuck in their own head and they can't push past that to see, okay, how can I serve? Or how can I still show up and do what it is that I need to do to support those whom I serve?
So great question. So I'll give you an intellectual approach strategy, and then I'll give you kind of the heart strategy. Okay. So the intellectual strategy is sitting down and looking at what do I believe to be true about myself? What do I believe to be true about others? What do I believe to be true about the world around me? Because our beliefs determine our behavior, they drive our behavior. So if I believe that I'm not enough, if I believe that I'm not a good leader, then I'm going to focus a lot on trying to prevent other people from seeing that. Right. So it drives what you're doing on a stage. It drives what you're doing when you're talking to somebody. So fundamentally, there's a lot of talk about positive thinking and mindset. I talk about this results model, which is results, outcome, impact, whatever you want to call it. That outcome and results is driven by behaviors and what we do. Our behaviors are determined by our mindset. Our mindset is determined by we're talking about personalities and how you're created and all that, human needs, and then human needs psychology, Tony Robbins, and he talks about that. We have basic human needs, and then these beliefs that we have about ourselves, others, and the world around us. And the lens through which we see others is the lens through which we see ourselves. So if I don't see myself as being a certain way, or I'm critical towards myself, I will be critical towards others. So evaluating those goals, writing those down and saying, wow, what do I really honestly, what do I believe to be true? What are the limiting beliefs that I have about myself? And are those really serving me? And look at them and really take stock and saying, wow, okay, you know what? I've been saying this to myself, that inner critic. How can I transform that? That's the lie. Right. And what does God say about me? If I'm a person of faith, maybe I look at the scripture and I say, what's the scripture that actually counteracts that? I believe that I'm not good enough at this. No, I'm going to look at Gideon, and look at the story of Gideon or David or whatever. Right. So that's one strategy, is to do that and start to say those things to yourself, like literally, not just, oh yeah, sure, I'm saying it, but saying it with emotion, saying it like as a declaration and a decree over yourself, because we speak life through our words. That's one. The other thing that I do is, and by the way, that's a fascinating exercise. You probably have done it, right? You're just like, whoa, I didn't realize I believed all these things about myself. And fundamentally, a lot of our beliefs, I believe there's like a primary lie that we all learn about ourselves when we're young. And it's either it's not good enough or not enough in some way. I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable. I'm not important. I'm not significant. I'm not fast enough. I'm not attractive enough. Whatever it is, it's not enough. That's where the fundamentally comes down to. And so most people are actually trying to either outrun that by overachieving or hiding from it by preventing people from seeing who they are, because heaven forbid, if they actually saw who I am, they would realize and confirm that lie, right? Which is, I'm not enough. And there's like imposter syndrome comes from that. Anyway, so that's one exercise. The other exercise, which is really powerful, and especially with women, I have them do this exercise, and it's a mirror exercise. So I have them look in the mirror, and you'd be amazed. This is a simple exercise, but women will avoid it like more than they'll avoid doing laundry and anything else. Okay. They're like, oh, I just didn't have time. Really? You didn't have time. You're putting your makeup on. You had time. Is looking in the mirror and saying, I love you. I love you. And looking in your own eyes and saying, I love you. I am proud of you. And you notice all of the stuff that comes up. And I've had women that get very emotional, have a very difficult time doing this, because we really deep inside, we don't love ourselves. And so we put on a lot of masks and a lot of things and do the dance to try to cover that up. When really, if we were just to love ourselves and to really know that we were accepted, that we were approved, that we have value, that would be like settled and put to bed. From that place of security in knowing that nothing adds to my value, nothing takes away from my value, right? It's like I am valuable because I am. Moses asked God and he said, "Who am I?" He says, "I am that I am." Oh, and I remember one of my friends, she actually said it's like she saw it as a way of God was saying, "I am." And yes, that I am as well. And that I am as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about, and he is obviously perfect. In our case, we say, I am that I am. I am the failures as much as I am the successes. I am the strengths as much as I am the weaknesses. Yes, I am. And I still I love myself. I accept myself and God loves me. And when I know that, then I don't have to, I don't go into that judgment. And when I don't judge myself, then therefore I have the freedom to not also judge others. Because when I'm judging others, it's in comparison, right? If I don't feel good about myself, I'm going to judge and try to bring other people down. So fundamentally, to love ourselves, to be comfortable with ourselves, and to give ourselves, like I think about it almost as your spirit in the mirror talking to your soul. I'm with you. I'm going to be with you this whole time. I'm not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Other people might leave. Other people might die. Other people might, but I'm here with you. I'm on this journey with you, and I'm glad to be on this journey with you. I love you for everything I'm proud of you. You're resilient. And you start speaking to yourself. Don't wait for somebody else to do it. You may never hear it.
Right.
Say it to yourself.
Right.
And there's so much power in that, to the point where doesn't matter what anybody else says, because your self-worth, you realize, comes from God alone and from what you believe about yourself. And then you can go out there and be the best version of you and encourage other people to be the best version of themselves, because it's not a win-lose game anymore. Now it's a win-win game.
Right. Right. As you talked about the mirror exercise, I remember the first time I did that, and it was weird. It's weird to say this out loud, but it was almost like it was the very first time that I had seen myself in a mirror, right? It takes a level of vulnerability to like literally just stand there and look into your own eyes. And it's funny because we're always in the mirror, right? Like we're brushing our teeth and we're in the mirror, like we're putting on makeup, we're doing our hair, and we're in the mirror. But I remember when I stopped and I just stood there, I was also in a very low place during that time, and telling myself that I loved me and that I was proud of me. Like I wanted to close my eyes. Like I couldn't even look at myself to say those words. And of course, very emotional and bawling. And since that experience, like I try to challenge myself to do that on a regular basis, right? It's like my check-in, but I understand why your clients have such a hard time, because I remember the first time I did that. It was so uncomfortable. And it was so hard to believe. It was so hard to accept. And it was so hard to just look at me. So I think that that's a powerful exercise. So for those of you who are listening, you don't have to be down in the dumps or in a dark place. But just taking that time and staring into your own eyes. It was almost like I was staring into my own soul. So thank you so much for sharing that example or that exercise for people to do. And then one other thing that I wanted to comment on before we transition into the Blitz session here is that I totally agree with you that oftentimes when we are looking at others and we're being critical or we're judging or we're jealous or envious or whatever the case may be, it's really a reflection of how we see ourselves. But I also challenge the audience to look at it. Think about when you see someone that you really, really admire, with someone that like you are just in awe of, right? just as easily as you being critical of someone is a reflection of where you're critical of yourself, you wouldn't be able to see whatever that good thing is in that person if it were not contained in you. And so one of the exercises that I do, like when I feel like I'm spiraling down, right? I go back to, who do I admire? And why do I admire them? What is it about them? What is about their heart, their soul, the work that they do that impacts me? And in that moment, I'm reminded that I can only see that because that capability is in me. I can only grasp their greatness because that is also in me. And it helps me level set back to, you know what? You may be having a difficult time right now, Sabine, but whether it's MLK or Mother Teresa or Whitney Houston, those are the people who I envision. Mandela. When I think of these people and the way that they've changed the world through their gifts and just being themselves, I am reminded that, you know what, Sabine, you're that person as well. And so suck it up, Buttercup, with whatever you're dealing with right now and move forward, because it doesn't change who you are inside and what you're capable of. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great point. Such a great point. You can't see it if it's not present in you. So beautiful.
Yes. So thank you so much. I could keep talking to you for hours, but I know I want to be respectful of your time here. And so as you think about your journey, right, and everything that you've been through, everything that you've seen, everything that you've walked through and crawled through in many cases, right? If you could go back and give a piece of advice to a younger version of yourself, based on all the wisdom that you've gained, what might that be? What would you share with her?
I would say know your value. Know your value. Yeah. Back then, starting out, I had big dreams and ideas of what I wanted to create. I didn't know my value. And so there was a disconnect between those two. And so I had this vision of everybody else knows it. And I need to find those people who are going to tell me how to do it, rather than actually realizing that I had the answers. And it's great to have all mentors. I'm a big fan of that. But knowing that I had value already and that I had wisdom already, and that I would also demand my value, right? Rather than selling myself short, which I did early on a lot, is sell myself short and let others sell me short as well. And so that's what I would say to my younger self. Expect big.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And as far as looking ahead, right? And I know none of us have the answers, but 30, 40, 50, 60 years from now, as you're looking back over your life, what do you want that narrative to be? What do you want to look back and say, yeah, this is what I did, and this is the legacy that I've created or that I'll be leaving?
I want to leave a trail. You talk about the legacy. I want to leave a trail of people that know who they are and know who they are in Christ, and that are operating from their place of identity, purpose, and assignment, and doing it with confidence. Yeah, and doing big things, but doing it from a place of not good goals, but God goals. And so as they do that they'll impact others. It's like that ripple effect, that domino effect that goes out. But that's my goal.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. And then last question for you, because I'm a big believer that leaders are readers, right? And so I can see the book shelf back there. As you think about a book or books that have been really, really impactful or supportive to you in your growth, in your development, what is one of those books, or what are some of those books?
Well, I mentioned one earlier, Mae McCarthy, The Path to Wealth, really good book. Highly recommend it. Obviously, the Bible. Read through Proverbs, read through Isaiah, read through the New Testament, the Old Testament from cover to cover. It's brilliant. But doing it from a lens of leadership There's so much there. And I think about Jesus, the story of Jesus, and here he had a ministry of 3.5 years. And whether somebody believes in him as the Son of God or not, here's a guy who came to earth, was born, and in 3 years with 12 disciples changed the world with no internet, right? No PR agencies to get the word out. And 2,000 years later, we're still talking to him. He's got billions of followers. There isn't anyone in history that has been able to do that, to my knowledge, that has been able to do that. And so to learn and from his example of leadership alone is just very powerful. So that's one, as well as the book by Mae McCarthy. And then the other one that I pulled off my shelf as we were talking earlier before we even started recording is StrengthsFinder, is really understanding what your strengths are. This may be, like I said earlier, a confirmation, but it for me, it was a confirmation. I figured out what these were on my own, but then as I did the assessment, it was like, wow, yeah, okay, like this. And it confirmed for me what I already knew to be true, but maybe had taken for granted. And there's oftentimes the thing that we're a genius at, we take it for granted. It's so second nature to us that we take it for granted. And when we take it for granted, we don't pay attention to it. And therefore, we don't know how to leverage it. So once you know your strengths and recognize them as strengths, as valuable, then you can leverage them for even more.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And so, Nicole, as we wrap up here and then I let you leave to continue to conquer the world and do his work, as the audience is listening and they want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to connect with you? Where do you hang out? What do you have going on right now that they can tap into?
Sure. Well, I do have my podcast, of course. So leadersoftransformation.com is the best place to go to reach me, to find out what I'm up to. There's also, there's a coaching page there. If somebody wants to learn a little bit more about the coaching that I do, actually says, I added this about a year or two ago, the 10 things you need to know about me. And so this is who I am. And if there's something that I can do to help you, you feel like I might be a good fit as a coach for you, then you can schedule a time where we can have a conversation and we'll see if it's the right fit. But everything, is really through that. You can hear about it through my podcast. I recommend it. Where do I hang out? I do hang out on social media, but not as much as people think, because you know what, we can spend a lot of time there and a lot of busy work, but I like to stay in the productive work. So I spend as little time as I can on it, but still being able to make an impact. But I'm certainly on there. You can find me, Nicole Jansen Inc. And working on Twitter. I'm working on Twitter. So getting that going. But yeah.
All right. Awesome. I have all those links. So we will definitely include those in the show notes. And I did notice that top 10 list on your website. And I was just like, I love this. It's just like, what you see is what you get, and either you're going to self-select in or self-select out. And so I love the way that you're authentically you in every single capacity. So we'll definitely be sure to include those links. And of course, the podcast, be sure to subscribe. I know it's on Apple and all of the registries, but you can also listen to it directly on the website as well. With that, Nicole, thank you so much for this conversation. Hopefully the audience took away some wisdom, and certainly the exercises that you shared that they can do for themselves to start on the journey, if they're not already, of self-discovery and understanding truly who they are and the greatness that resides within them, just waiting for the opportunity to come forth. So with that, audience, thank you so much for tuning in this week. I will be back next week with another amazing guest. Until then, have a wonderful rest of the week. Take care. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of She Leads Now. If you found today's episode helpful or got a piece of insight that you plan to implement in your business or organization, I would love to hear from you. Connect with me on LinkedIn at Sabine Gideon, that's my handle, and send me a private message, or feel free to go ahead and leave a review on either Apple or Spotify. I also invite you to share this episode with anyone in your network who you think might benefit from this content. Lastly, be sure to check the show notes and the description below for links to resources, including relevant downloads, articles, and any upcoming training. Until we chat again, have a blessed and powerful week.